Hello, and welcome to this webinar on improving vaccination experiences for the autistic community. My name is Courtney Landers. I'm an autism advisor at Autism Tasmania, which is the peak independent voice for the Tasmanian autism community. Today's presentation is based on peer-reviewed research, the lived experience of the autistic community, and two surveys we performed. One from 2020 on the needs of autistic Tasmanians in allied health settings, the other from October 2021 on the experiences of autistic Tasmanians, specifically when getting vaccinated for COVID-19, which is where the quotes at the bottom of some slides have been taken from. Before we get started, a few quick notes on autism. Autism is a developmental disability resulting from differences in the way the brain develops before and after birth. Autistic people think, sense, communicate, move, and socialize differently. When considering what I describe here today, it is important to remember that autism is a spectrum, not a scale from low to high. The autistic community members you encounter will have their own unique profile of strengths and challenges. This is particularly so for women and non-binary people who often present differently to autistic men. When communicating with someone on the autism spectrum, it is respectful to follow their lead in terms of how they would like to be referred to, whether that is person first or identity first. Guided by both key national and international autistic-led organisations and the Autism CRC, at Autism Tasmania, we use autistic person and person on the spectrum interchangeably. And we do not use language that pathologizes, stigmatizes, or categorizes autism, such as has autism, is high or low functioning, or has severe or mild autism. There are three core autistic experiences most relevant to the vaccination setting. These are sensory processing, predictability, and communication. For each of these traits, today, I'm going to step you through what autistic people may experience day to day and their needs as a result. How these needs are challenged within a clinic setting, so why they may find it hard to come to a clinic in the first place and why they may leave a clinic before they get vaccinated, and then how you can help. So I'll give some suggestions and tips for how you can make the vaccination process easier for autistic people. Now, it might be that you as immunisers are not in control of all of these issues, but if you're working at a clinic with some or many of these problems, you can be aware that your autistic appointments may already be distressed by the time they get to you, and you can put some of these other changes in place to try to lower that level of stress. Sensory processing. Almost all people on the autism spectrum will experience some form of sensory processing difference. So some autistic people will be very sensitive or very insensitive to bright lights, loud noises, or strong smells, to the point of perhaps feeling physical pain. Others may have a very high or very low pain threshold, or be very aware or unaware of their body's needs, such as hunger, thirst, or nausea, as well as feeling too hot or too cold, or needing to rest. Still, other people may have sensory motor challenges, such as difficulties with balance and coordination, including handwriting. In a vaccination clinic, this means the following can be challenging or distressing. Spaces with crowds, loud noises, and lots of background noise. Having to queue outside where the temperature can be a challenge. And based on our survey results, we know the Blunston Arena seems to present a particular challenge due to queuing outside. There's also bright fluorescent lights, smells from sanitizers and cleaning products, uncomfortable furniture in the waiting areas, and then, of course, the pain from vaccination itself, as well as pain and discomfort from side effects. You can help with these challenges in the following ways. First up, offer pain relief. Secondly, Don't question anyone wearing a cap, hat, or sunglasses inside, as these are often coping mechanisms and people may not want to disclose that they're autistic. Thirdly, allow people to stim. So stimming is any kind of repetitive action or movement. And in addition to stimming being a healthy everyday action for people on the spectrum, many autistic people stim to help themselves cope in challenging situations. In addition to the stereotypical hand flapping and body rocking, stimming might also look like repetitive finger movements, repeating a phrase over and over, fiddling or touching a particular object, or even listening to or watching repetitive music or videos. As with hats, don't question people's stims and simply allow someone to continue until the point that you need them to sit still, and then try to make that as quick as possible. It's also important to ask someone explicitly before you touch them and tell them what you're about to do. So, for example, tell someone before you sterilize their arm, not just before you perform the injection. Some other things you can do to help with sensory issues include avoiding using personal fragrances and air fresheners, avoiding wearing busy patterns, loud colors, and jangly objects, not having TV or radio playing in the background and not using loudly ticking clocks, not having the room too hot or too cold, lowering the lights and not using fluorescent lights where possible, and finally, using comfortable furniture in calm colors wherever possible. Predictability. The brain differences underlying autism mean that people on the spectrum are often good at noticing details, understanding and remembering patterns and routines, and understanding visual information. But they also mean that autistic people can find it hard to notice wider contextual clues that indicate what's going to happen next. And therefore, they make it hard to prepare for change and plan for the immediate or distant future. This can make it very difficult to cope in an unfamiliar situation, or for someone to understand why they might need to do something that they're being asked to do. In a vaccination clinic, this means the following can be challenging or distressing. Being separated from family members or other support people, for example, such as if a waiting room is full, having to move between multiple waiting areas before being vaccinated, not knowing how long the whole process will take or what it will involve, being given conflicting instructions, such as being directed to one waiting room, but then being directed to another when you get there because that one just filled up. Unexpected changes can be particularly difficult, such as the procedure being different when someone returns for their second vaccination. And trying to follow directions in an unfamiliar place can also be particularly difficult. Many supports that can help with predictability need to be in place before someone even arrives at the clinic, so they may not be within your control as an immuniser. If you can, however, offer people information about the clinic before they arrive, such as maps of the clinic, pictures of the waiting rooms with information about the steps involved, and even social stories. If you're booking someone's vaccination or second vaccination, let people know what supports are already available to them, such as being able to bring a support person or having pain relief on hand. If you're asking someone to do something, give them a reason or explanation. For example, wait here for 10 minutes because there are too many people inside the next room. Communication. The brain differences underlying autism mean that people on the spectrum often take longer to process spoken language, meaning they might take longer to understand what you have said. This is a particular problem if they're expected to respond to verbal instructions quickly. Autistic people also often understand things in a very literal way. They may have difficulty understanding non-verbal cues like facial expressions and body language, and they may not provide the non-verbal cues that you're expecting, such as showing pain or stress through their body language. They may also have particular difficulty communicating when stressed or overstimulated, such as someone who turns up to the clinic and is able to speak. If they go through a huge amount of stress, they then may become nonverbal and unable to speak in that situation. So in a vaccination clinic, this means that the following can be challenging or distressing. Trying to understand someone wearing a mask, which is something that multiple respondents to our survey said was particularly difficult for them. It can also be highly stressful trying to understand an instruction when you're expected to respond immediately. It can also be very difficult to follow verbal directions in an unfamiliar building, and this is compounded by the stress of interacting with unfamiliar people who might be quite stressed themselves. All of this can result in someone on the spectrum becoming nonverbal or just having a very distressing situation and leaving before they get vaccinated. You can help in the following ways. Use clear, specific, direct, and concise language, but avoid being patronizing. Provide written instructions and visual tools where you can, such as signs and directions, and a yes/no sheet if you're trying to communicate with someone who cannot speak at the time. Ask clarifying questions if you're not sure that someone has understood what you've said, and ask people to describe things like pain, fever, or nausea in words if you're unsure that they're showing it through their body language. Don't expect people to provide eye contact with you, and above all, try and be patient. Each of these three factors can and will affect the other and be affected by the situation that someone is in. If someone is already feeling anxious before their appointment, their senses may become far more sensitive. Sensory overload at the clinic can then in turn increase someone's need to know what's happening and what's going to happen next. And then combining that sensory overload with an unpredictable setting will make it much harder for an autistic person to understand information and communicate their needs. In summary, vaccination clinics can be very challenging for the autistic community because of the sensory environment, a lack of predictability, and communication challenges posed by speed, masks, and unfamiliarity. You can assist autistic people to successfully get vaccinated by adjusting the sensory environment wherever possible, providing plenty of information about available supports, the location and the process, and communicating clearly and patiently with signs and visuals available wherever possible. By taking these steps, you make it more likely that our autistic community members can get vaccinated and stay safe from COVID-19. Thank you for listening.